Normally traffic would just go up this side of the road and down the other, but both lanes of traffic are covering that for the moment. And on the other side, we have the Israeli military standing there in quite some force with their tanks and their jeeps. We know there are a number of them up on the hill as well in that building site. And as I say, they've been firing volley after volley. There goes another volley after volley of tear gas towards the protesters who are some half a kilometre away. And this at the moment is the closest that we can get. But those, we're now into what has become a traditional stalemate in these situations, where you have the Israelis standing there, firing tear gas, forcing the crowd back. The crowd move back, then regather, come back towards the lines where they were standing before. And this will go on for another several hours, presumably, because it's been going on for a couple of hours already now.
Alan, thanks for that. Alan Fisher live for us there in Colombia in the occupied West Bank. Just to bring you up to date now, this split screen you're seeing, just saw Alan there to the right of your screen. To the left is the US Ambassador David Freeman speaking now at the start of this dedication ceremony to officially launch the new US Embassy opening in West Jerusalem today. The result of the decision by President Trump earlier in the year, very controversial decision to move that embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and the international condemnation that decision resulted in. Let's go to the Gaza-Israel border now, where Stephanie Decker has been reporting to us all day now. So Stephanie, just bring us up to date then on what you've been seeing and hearing there.
Well, at the moment, what we saw just at the front of that crowd was a couple of injuries, live fire injuries. Also, women were among the sort of a small crowd that was moving forward. And then we saw medics moving very slowly towards the fence with their hands up in the air, signaling to the soldiers that they were coming to pick up the injured. And that's what you're seeing there among the tires that they're burning to obscure. You still see them with their hands up in the air, actually, at the moment. They're still trying to reach some of the injured, which would have been getting close to that fence. And as we've been reporting throughout the day, Israel is not holding back when it comes to the use of live fire. It's snipers targeting everyone, really, that approaches that fence. Even in sort of the areas where we are, people have been shot. So yes, a constant stream of injuries away from that border area, Hazem.
Yeah, and from what we're seeing there, Stephanie, it doesn't look like these protests are going to end anytime soon.
No, and you know, there's actually quite a few women that I'm seeing now running away. They put a tire and running away from it. And there's sniper fire now. This is what people here will tell you is the only way of making their voices heard. And despite the dangers, and they're real dangers, Hazem, of being hit by a live bullet, by being maimed, by being killed. And if you're not killed, a lot of people have had amputations, living life without a leg. People will tell you that that's sort of, they have nothing left to lose. And as we've been saying throughout the day, and my colleague Huda, who's in southern Gaza, Khan Yunis, has been telling you, the message is the same from anyone you ask. And that is that it has become so desperate here. And I think certainly on a day when the international media is also focusing on it is a huge event, the opening of the US Embassy in Jerusalem, the fact that the media is also focusing on this at the same time, and you have such a contrast in picture. You know, men in suits, where ladies perfectly made up in West Jerusalem at the US Embassy. I just heard the American anthem played in my ear a little earlier. And then when you watch what unfolds here, and it's man-made, Hazem. These people cannot leave of their own accord. These days, the economic situation is desperate, not just because Israel and Egypt have its borders closed, but because the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, decided to cut salaries here because of the infighting between Hamas and Fatah. People here will tell you they are victims of everyone. And that's why the people have decided to take matters into their own hands largely and come out here in huge numbers and trying to get that message across to anyone who's willing to listen, certainly to the international community.
Indeed, as you say, Stephanie, the contrast really couldn't be wider there, and we're seeing it in our split screen coverage right now. To the left, that dedication ceremony to open the new US Embassy going on right now. U.S. Ambassador David Friedman was speaking just a moment ago. And just to remind our viewers, we're expected to hear from Donald Trump via video link a little bit later. But just to turn back to you, Stephanie, on this, the sense of desperation, the fact that things have gotten to this point now is the result of years of pent-up frustration from Palestinians on the Gaza side where you are.
Yes, and you know, covered this for a while, and this is not a surprise to Israel. The army, the intelligence services have been warning for years, really, that Gaza is at breaking point, particularly in the last year or so, and that if nothing changes, I'll just get Maher to zoom in again on what's happening right at the fence. Some people running back. If nothing changes, that it could explode. And I think that is the sense that you get here, is people really don't know what there's left to live for. Some people will tell you, well, you know what, I'd actually rather cross that fence, get arrested, get put in Israeli jail. At least I have electricity and I have a warm meal. There's another injury coming just to the side of us. It's been quite an extraordinary day in the sense that Gaza hasn't seen these scenes. Israel hasn't had to deal with this kind of a protest. When Israel deals with Gaza, it says that it's dealing with its armed groups, dealing with Qassam, dealing with Islamic Jihad, the Al-Quds Brigade, rockets. Not a single rocket has been fired out of the strip since these protests began. And I attended a press briefing with Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, a couple of days ago, and he said, well, Israel accuses us of sending our men to the border. Well, you know, yeah, sure, some of our men go to the border, but they've decided to leave their guns at home. They've decided not to use their rockets. They're using their own Palestinian identity and their legitimate right to protest an occupation, what he calls Palestinian resistance. So this is what you're seeing unfolding here. And I think also briefly worth highlighting, yes, it's a lot of youth, angry young men who, you know, they're a product of this generation of blockade, but you have a lot of families here, a lot of women, elderly, children, who will tell you that this is a moment that they're coming out to let their voices be heard. But I think, again, bringing it back to those numbers of injured and deaths, you know, very, very high. And we're expecting those to rise still throughout the day.
Indeed, and just to update you on those numbers, it's being reported 37 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli gunfire today on this Monday. About 2,000 are injured, demonstrators surging towards the border fence. You've seen it a few times today, and this taking place on the same day that the United States is opening its embassy in Jerusalem. That's what you're seeing on the left side of the screen, that dedication ceremony taking place right now. This has been the most violent day since these Gaza protests began more than 6 weeks ago. I'm going to turn now to Harry Fawcett, who is in West Jerusalem and is at the scene of that dedication ceremony. So, Harry, just what does today's event mean, particularly to the Israeli government led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
The eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
Well, I mean, hugely celebratory as far as the Israeli government is concerned. This is something that he has long lobbied for. Of course, there was a U.S. congressional vote which passed a bill in 1995 which mandated the U.S. embassy should move from Tel Aviv here to Jerusalem. And the ambassador, David Friedman, in opening this ceremony, said 23 long years later, Donald J. Trump has made good on that. He has ended the waiver system that presidents have used up until this point, and this will now be the U.S. Embassy. We've also just heard from a preacher, Robert Jeffress, an evangelical preacher. Important that he was one of the first voices that we heard in this entire ceremony. There is a large contingent of U.S. evangelical members here in this delegation, and he talked about thanking God for providing the world and the United States with Donald J. Trump as president, someone who would stand on the right side of history and on the right side of the Lord himself. So there's a lot of religiosity for many people here attached to this embassy move.
Yeah, I mean, talk a little bit more about that. Why is it that evangelical Christians support this action so much? What does this whole idea of the Jews in Israel and the historical context of this, why does this matter so much? Because to people who aren't familiar with this, it's kind of does make for strange bedfellows, doesn't it?
Well, that's the question I asked to one such person, a preacher from Florida, saying, why does this political decision now in 2018 have such spiritual significance for so many American Christians? And he said, well, when you bless Israel, then God blesses you. When you curse Israel, God curses you. But before that, he was speaking to someone from a Christian broadcasting network, saying that there was an explosion of joy in the heavens when this decision was made. There are a substantial number of evangelical Christians who believe that this is part of the story towards the Judgment Day, towards Armageddon, towards the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so for people who believe that this is part of that story, then that is one reason that they can overlook so much of Donald Trump that doesn't tally with the evangelical narrative, not least the fact that he's been seen to be, at least through his lawyer, paying off a porn star in a case over an alleged affair. The fact that he's doing things like this, making good on promises that he made to them, and that obviously he's indebted to them for their votes, that is enough to get him the kind of support that we're seeing here.
Indeed, and speaking of President Trump, we are expected to hear from him in about 10 minutes or so. He's expected to address this audience via video link from Washington. This was all the result of his decision earlier in the year to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to West Jerusalem, a decision that sparked anger from the Palestinian side and international condemnation. But we are, I understand, going to listen in a little bit now to our next speaker, who is U.S. Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan, the U.S. Ambassador David Freeman, introducing him right now. Let's listen in.
Thank you, Ambassador Friedman, for those kind remarks. On behalf of Secretary Pompeo, thank you for your dedicated efforts to establish this diplomatic mission and to ensure the strongest possible bond between Israel and the United States. We're also grateful to you and your team for the close coordination and months of detailed planning to prepare for this important day of celebration. It's an honor for me to be part of President Trump's official delegation on this momentous occasion, on a day, as you have already noted, so steeped in history. It's a privilege to stand before so many distinguished guests, political and religious leaders of Israel and the United States, and to welcome you all to the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, Israel. I also come with a message from Secretary Pompeo, who sends his best wishes. It meant a great deal to him that he was able to visit Israel on his first trip overseas, and he regrets that he's unable to be here with us today in person. The Secretary asked me to convey on his behalf the great pride that he feels, a pride that I share, on this historic day for our two countries. As President Trump said in December, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is first a recognition of reality, a reality many, many years in the making. Jerusalem is, indisputably, the capital of Israel, a capital chosen by a sovereign nation as the seat of its government. But moving the U.S. Embassy on a broader scale is also a step toward advancing peace in this city, in the broader region, and throughout the world. The streets of Jerusalem, with its many temples, mosques, and churches, point to its place in history. But in Jerusalem, we can also see a glimmer of the future filled with hope, the hope for greater understanding and peace. Today, I'm confident that the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem will be, in the words of President Trump, a magnificent tribute to peace. That is what we are celebrating here today as we officially open the newest diplomatic mission of the United States of America. As we do, we also recognize the deep and historic friendship that brought this mission into being. On this day, as several have noted, the United States recognized the State of Israel. It is fitting that today we mark a new milestone and a new day of bright hope and promise for the United States and Israel. The State Department is proud to continue our close cooperation with the Israeli government and people from our new embassy here in Jerusalem. We're grateful to President Rivlin, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their friendship and their hard work to keep our alliance ironclad. Thank you all for your tremendous support as we sought to make the President's pledge of the move of our embassy a reality. We're eager to make our bonds even stronger from this very place. The United States is committed to Israel, we're committed to our alliance, and we are committed to building a more peaceful, more prosperous future together. May God bless the U.S.-Israel alliance on this historic day, and I thank you for letting me be a part of it.
So you've just been hearing there from Deputy U.S. Secretary of State John Sullivan announcing the official opening of the new U.S. Embassy here. David Friedman, U.S. Ambassador, about to introduce U.S. President Trump now via video link.
At this ceremony. Please watch and listen.
Exactly 70 years ago, the United States, under President Harry Truman, became the first nation to recognize the State of Israel. Today, we officially opened the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Congratulations. It's been a long time coming. Almost immediately after declaring statehood in 1948, Israel designated the city of Jerusalem as its capital. The capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. So important. Today, Jerusalem is the seat of Israel's government. It is the home of the Israeli legislature and the Israeli Supreme Court and Israel's prime minister and president. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years, we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. On December 6, 2017, at my direction, the United States finally and officially recognized Jerusalem as the true capital of Israel. Today, we follow through on this recognition and open our embassy in the historic and sacred land of Jerusalem. And we're opening it many, many years ahead of schedule. As I said in December, our greatest hope is for peace. The United States remains fully committed to facilitating a lasting peace agreement, and we continue to support the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including at the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. This city and its entire nation is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people. The United States will always be a great friend of Israel and a partner in the cause of freedom and peace. We wish Ambassador Friedman good luck as he takes up his office in this beautiful Jerusalem embassy, and we extend a hand in friendship to Israel, the Palestinians, and to all of their neighbors. May there be peace. May God bless this embassy. May God bless all who serve there, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
So you just heard there from U.S. President Donald Trump addressing that audience via video link, that dedication ceremony to officially open the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, the result of his decision to move that embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a decision that has enraged Palestinians but has drawn a lot of support from the Israeli public. 2/3 of Israelis in one poll, as our correspondent Harry was saying earlier, support this decision. The government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu very much supporting it. He had called for this for some time. There you've just seen the U.S. Ambassador David Friedman there about to begin the process of officially unveiling the embassy and the official seal. U.S. President Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner, senior White House advisor, taking their places to unveil that now.
On behalf of the 45th President of the United States of America, we welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Thank you.
So there it is, the official unveiling there by the president's daughter Ivanka Trump of the new U.S. embassy, flanked there by U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, officially unveiling this new embassy. It's something of a makeshift embassy at the moment because this decision to move was moved up to coincide with the commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel. We're going to bring in Harry Fawcett now, who's at the scene, has been seeing and listening to this with us. Harry.
Well, we just heard there what many people here had been coming for, the address from Donald Trump. Again, he talked about this being a historical occasion, one which was coming on the anniversary of President Harry Truman's recognition of Israel. His recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, of course, came at the end of last year. Now he cements that with this concrete move of making this what was up until now a consulate, a U.S. embassy. Now, we also heard from his Deputy Secretary of State, John Sullivan, again making a similar speech. Neither man referred by name to the Palestinians on a day when so many Palestinians obviously have been injured and been killed on the Gaza border. He did, though, President Trump, talk about the need to maintain respect for the status quo of Jerusalem's holy sites. He called it a sacred land, and he referred to the Al-Aqsa compound as the Haram al-Sharif, using Islamic terminology for it, as well as the Jewish name for it, the Temple Mount. So, obviously, both men talking about what they hope will eventuate better chances for peace on a day which has seen anything but peace, obviously.
And Harry, as we were saying, this is something that the Israeli government had been calling for some time, and it was hoped that this would happen once Donald Trump became president, given the support that he enjoys, particularly among the religious right and the evangelical Christians there in the U.S.
Indeed. I mean, this is one of his campaign pledges. Another one was to pull out of the Iran deal. He made good on that last week. Today, he is making good on a pledge that he gave to evangelical Christians in particular, and there are many of them here. We heard almost at the beginning of this ceremony a blessing from a leading evangelical preacher, a pretty controversial one, who has said some things about the Muslim faith, the Mormon faith, the Jewish faith, which many of those people of those faiths would find hugely insulting, calling Mormonism and Islam religions from the pits of hell, and saying that Jews could not be saved. He sees that. He says that that is mainstream Christian theology. And he made a speech talking about how thankful that people of his faith, people from his part of his faith in particular, were for the presidency of Donald Trump, thanking the Lord for the gift of Donald Trump, someone who would stand on the right side of history and stand on the right side of the Lord God himself. So there are people here in this crowd for whom this is a religiously significant moment, one which, according to some Christian theology, could advance the coming of the Messiah, again, the second coming of Christ, and Armageddon and all the rest of it. So that is where some of the US base of Donald Trump is coming from. One of the reasons, as well as his very close alliance with Benjamin Netanyahu, that we've seen this move made.
All right, thanks for that, Harry. Harry Fawcett reporting to us there live from West Jerusalem. We are going to show you now some live pictures of a scene that's just been a protest by Israelis and Palestinians against the establishment of this embassy. This taking place right near the site of that U.S. embassy dedication in West Jerusalem. So it does give you a sense that this is a decision that does not enjoy support among a section of Israelis and certainly among most Palestinians. As we've been saying, a very contentious decision there from Donald Trump. You heard from him a moment ago in that video link when he said that the United States, in his words, remains fully committed to facilitating a lasting peace agreement. Turning back then to Harry on this, just before we let you go, Harry, it's hard to see any chance of a dialogue with the Palestinians given this decision at this point.
Well, no, I mean, they've been very clear on that from the moment that the United States decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Within a day or two, it was very clear that the Palestinian position had changed vis-a-vis the United States. It was no longer the Palestinian leadership going to see the U.S. as a valid broker in any peace process going forward. The Palestinian president is looking for support from other international bodies, other countries in mapping out a different way forward for the peace process. At the same time, of course, as Jared Kushner, the man that Donald Trump has entrusted with coming up with a peace plan, his son-in-law, is here, and he is due to speak in the next few minutes at this speech, at this ceremony rather, a relatively lengthy speech given what we've been hearing from other people, a few minutes long, so we wait to see whether he gives any kind of indication of the imminent publication of that peace plan. However, as we've heard from the Palestinians, they want nothing to do, they say, with the US on this subject, and on a day when so many Palestinians have died in protests really to mark this moment, it's hard to see how for all the talk of peace and the US commitment to a peace plan, whether they will have anyone to talk to on the Palestinian side who have entirely said that by taking sides in this way, the United States is no longer a valid partner.
All right, for the moment, Harry Fawcett live for us there in West Jerusalem. And just to let you know, we're also expecting to hear in that ceremony from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a little bit later. Let's turn back now to what's been happening on the Gaza-Israel border that we've been covering for you all day. It's been reported that now that 41 Palestinians have been killed on what's been easily the bloodiest single day since this campaign of demonstrations along the border fence began more than 6 weeks ago. Now it's been reported as well, Israeli soldiers and snipers using tear gas as well as live fire to keep those protesters from entering, the Palestinian protesters from entering the Israeli territory and breaching the border fence. Stephanie Decker is standing by for us live there. So Stephanie, bring us up to date then on what you're seeing and hearing there and what's been happening since last we spoke to you.
What you're seeing at the front of that crowd, Hazem, is you'll see sort of one by one almost, people running a little further forward, just sort of in the position of where you see the burning tires, and then right away crouching down. Of course, opposite them and just around 100 meters or so, you have Israeli sniper positions. These sniper positions are to the left, to the front, and all the way further along the border. They've actually beefed up. We saw that change when we arrived here this morning. You see one of them there catapulting a stone, throwing stones as a symbol of the Palestinian resistance over the years. So we've seen more of the same, and unfortunately, you know, a steady stream of injuries hearing live fire being used, tear gas. Earlier we saw, certainly for the first time, a small black drone would come, hover overhead, come a little further back to where we are, and then just drop tear gas from the sky. That happened a few times, and now what happens is the usual, that one of the Israeli vehicles shows up and tries to push people back from the fence. People are determined here, Hazem. Might move, there you see it again, they might move from the fence once it lands, but then they come back to their positions.
And these are protests, as we've been saying, that have been going on for more than 6 weeks now, and the contrast that we're seeing, you really can't overstate it. On one side, you're seeing this ceremony to dedicate an embassy with lots of dignitaries and guests gathered for that occasion, and on the other, we're seeing a desperate situation of Palestinians along that border fence living under continued siege.
Absolutely, and I think I heard Harry. There you get another lobby being shot across. They're clearly targeting some of the youth that are laying there close to the border. I think Harry said, I think I heard in my ear correctly, I think it was President Trump, forgive me if I misheard, about being on the right side of history. Well, I don't think anyone here, and even in the occupied West Bank or the Palestinians of East Jerusalem will agree with that. I think people here will tell you that what's being done to them is inhumane. And I think this is why, and you're seeing it. I mean, I was listening to the inauguration in my ear in IFB, and as I heard them saying welcome to the US Embassy in Jerusalem, what we were seeing ahead of us was a volley of tear gas being fired by the Israeli army on top of unarmed protesters. They weren't storming the fence. They've been standing there, as they have been, for most part of the day. This area you see in front of us, Hazem, is what really has been putting pressure on the Israeli army, on the Israeli authorities. A couple of 100 meters between this area and where the fence is and Israeli sniper positions. They have beefed up the soldiers on the other side because they're concerned about a breach of the fence. There have been small incidents, but certainly what you're seeing here is an act of defiance, is of unarmed thousands of people standing simply opposite the Israeli soldiers and opposite that fence that keeps them penned in here. They will tell you no freedom of movement here. No one can leave when they want to. They need permissions, whether it's from Israel, whether it's from Egypt, and also sometimes whether it's from Hamas.
All right, for the moment, Stephanie Decker live for us there on the Gaza-Israel border near Gaza City. Well, to the south of Stephanie's location is Hoda Abdelhamid, who's also near the border. She is in southern Gaza. Hoda, just tell us what you've been seeing and hearing there.
Well, certainly it's been a very tough day here, and we're actually next to Khan Yunis, east of Khan Yunis. I've actually just come back from one of the first aid tents that are along the border, and that's where all the wounded arrive as a first stop before then treating the lightly wounded ones on the spot and sending those in bad condition to the hospitals. Because if you recall, just a few weeks ago, the health authorities here in Gaza had already declared a state of emergency. They had said at the time that they just can't cope with the sheer volume of wounded that pour into hospitals in a very short span of time, just a few hours, when all of this unfolds here at the border. Now, if you look at the numbers today declared by the health authorities, at least 41 dead and nearly 2,000 injured, but that is actually double the toll of the first day of the protest. Now, what we have seen also at the first aid tent, we have seen people in very bad condition, shot by live ammunition in the stomach, in the legs. We've seen also people who were just had suffocated because of the amount of tear gas. But I have to tell you, we were standing there for about half an hour, and maybe in half an hour we saw at least maybe 40 to 50 ambulances arrived. It was relentless for the medical staff there. And then more ambulances were whizzing off to another tent that was a bit further down that road here next to the border. So certainly it is a very heavy toll for the Palestinians today in Gaza. And if there was anger at the end of the first day of the protest, which was the highest toll yet, then certainly what we're going to see unfolding in the next few days is going to be very complicated.
All right, Hodab Hamid, live for us there along the Gaza-Israel border in the southern part. We're going to go back to West Jerusalem now, where we're going to hear from Jared Kushner, the White House senior advisor and son-in-law of U.S. President.
Today in Jerusalem, the eternal heart of the Jewish people. And I am especially honored to be here today as a representative of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. I also want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu and Sarah for being with us here today to celebrate this historic occasion. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask all of the members of Congress who are here on their delegations to rise and be recognized. Today would not be possible without your advocacy throughout the years. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Sullivan, for leading our delegation, Secretary Mnuchin for your leadership and for your friendship, and of course, Ivanka, thank you for all of the great work you do to help so many people in our country and throughout the world, including me. So I love you. I also want to acknowledge Vice President Mike Pence for his tireless efforts to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. In December of last year, President Trump announced to the world that the United States would finally recognize the truth, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. He also declared that we would soon move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and just 5 months later, we are standing on these grounds. While presidents before him have backed down from their pledge to move the American embassy once in office, this president delivered, because when President Trump makes a promise, he keeps it. But today also demonstrates American leadership. By moving our embassy to Jerusalem, we have shown the world once again that the United States can be trusted. We stand with our friends and our allies, and above all else, we've shown that the United States of America will do what's right, and so we have. Israel's a sovereign nation with the right to determine its own capital, the same right that is enjoyed by every other country in the world. In taking this action, the United States has also chosen to strengthen the bond between our two countries. Our special bond is the envy of nations throughout the world. This bond is forged through shared history, sustained through shared interests, and immortalized through shared principles. The United States stands with Israel because we both believe in freedom. We stand together because we both believe in human rights. We stand together because we believe democracy is worth defending. And the United States stands with Israel because we know that it is the right thing to do. When we stand together for the principles and the values we share, we shine a light of justice unto the world. Israel proves every day the boundless power of freedom. This land is the only land in the Middle East in which Jews, Muslims, and Christians and people of all faiths participate and worship freely according to their beliefs. Israel protects women's rights, freedom of speech, and the right of every individual to reach their God-given potential. These are the same values that the United States cherishes. These are the values that bind us together. These are also the values that have made Israel one of the most vibrant nations in the world. This tiny population has spurred advancements in technology, medicine, and agriculture, making the world a healthier, safer, and more prosperous place. These are the blessings we hope Israel can one day share with its neighbors. Last week, President Trump acknowledged another truth and kept another promise. He announced his intention to exit the dangerous, flawed, and one-sided Iran deal. Iran's aggression threatens the many peace-loving citizens throughout the region and the entire world. From Israel to Jordan to Egypt to Saudi Arabia and beyond, many leaders are fighting to modernize their countries and create better lives for their people. In confronting common threats and in pursuit of common interests, previously unimaginable opportunities and alliances are emerging. I am also proud to be here today as a member of the team that President Trump has entrusted to lead the efforts to bring peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It has been an honor to work with our new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor John Bolton, our Ambassador, David Friedman, and our Special Representative, Jason Greenblatt, who really does so much great work. I also want to acknowledge Ambassador Nikki Haley, who really has created a new day for Israel at the UN. On December 6th, President Trump was very clear that his decision and today's celebration do not reflect a departure from our strong commitment to lasting peace, a peace that overcomes the conflicts of the past in order to give our children a brighter and more boundless future. As we have seen from the protests of the last month and even today, those provoking violence are part of the problem and not part of the solution. The United States is prepared to support a peace agreement in every way that we can. We believe that it is possible for both sides to gain more than they give so that all people can live in peace, safe from danger, free from fear, and able to pursue their dreams. The United States recognizes the sensitivity surrounding Jerusalem, a city that means so much to so many. Jerusalem is a city unique in the history of civilization. No other place on earth can claim significance to three major religions. Each day, Jews pray at the Western Wall, Muslims bow in prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Christians worship at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That is why President Trump has called many times, including right now, on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. While the challenges to peace are numerous, I have personally seen that the determination of the leaders in the region and throughout the world remains steadfast. They have seen too much pain, sorrow, and wasted opportunity, and they think it's time to try something better. Throughout history, Jerusalem has been the victim of war and conquest. It has been used to divide people and to instigate conflict by those with evil intentions. But it does not have to be this way. Jerusalem must remain a city that brings people of all faiths together, to visit, to worship, to respect each other, and to appreciate the majesty of history and the glory of God's creation. Israel has been a responsible custodian of Jerusalem and has kept these religious sites open to all. In fact, immediately after the 1967 war, one of the first acts of the Knesset was to adopt the Protection of Holy Places law, ensuring access to places of worship to members of all religions. Funds were immediately allocated to repair any damage to the churches, mosques, and synagogues that suffered through war, conflict, and neglect. As Israel turns 70, the search for a lasting peace turns over a new leaf, one of realism and of not being afraid to stand strongly with our allies for what is good, for what is right, and for what is true. When there is peace in this region, we will look back upon this day and remember that the journey to peace started with a strong America recognizing the truth. The pursuit of peace is the noblest pursuit of humankind. I believe peace is within reach if we dare to believe that the future can be different from the past, that we are not condemned to relive history, and that the way things were is not how they must forever be. It will not be an easy road, and it will be filled with difficult moments and tough decisions, but if we dream big, if we lead with courage, we can change the trajectory for millions from hopeless to boundless. This is a hope that many of us know personally. I am here today as a proud American and the grandson of Holocaust survivors. During World War II, my late grandparents Ray and Joseph Kushner fled their homes to the forests of Belarus to escape Nazi persecution. Somehow, they managed to resist the horrors and survive. After the war, they built a new life in America, a beacon of hope, a land of limitless opportunity. In my office in the White House, I keep a photo of them on my desk to remind me of how high the stakes are when nations fail to recognize right from wrong and the decisive power America has to tip the scales in favor of the righteous. Today, we take another historic step in that direction. I am confident that as a result, our nations will be stronger, our peoples more prosperous, and our futures filled with even greater promise for peace. May God bless you. May God bless Israel. May God bless the United States of America.
U.S. Senior White House Advisor Jared Kushner speaking there at the dedication ceremony for the new U.S. Embassy in West Jerusalem, saying that this was a significant moment in the history of both the United States and Israel, and that the embassy move shows, in his words, that shows the world that the United States can be trusted, and that it remains committed to what he says is a lasting peace in the region. We are expecting to hear in just a moment now from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as the U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman is about to introduce him. This is a decision that the Israeli government had been calling for some time. There was talk of unity and bringing people together, but that's not the scene that we're seeing on the right side of your picture, just outside the U.S. Embassy, where that dedication ceremony is taking place. People protesting that decision to move it to Jerusalem. The Israeli Prime Minister about to speak now at this dedication ceremony as he walks up now to the podium. We're going to listen in.
President Rivlin, יושב ראש הכנסת, רעייתו, שרים, חברי כנסת, ראש עיריית ירושלים, יושב ראש האופוזיציה, Secretary Menuhin, Deputy Secretary John Sullivan, Jason Greenblatt and Naomi, and your family, Ambassador David Friedman and Tammy, and your family, senators and members of Congress, and the governor of Florida, we have no better friends in the world. You stand for Israel and you stand for Jerusalem. Thank you. Arabanim, the chief rabbis of Israel, the distinguished rabbis who are here, the pastors, the ministers, the many friends who have come here from around the world, the many friends who have prayed for this day and have worked for this day. Thank you all. And of course, I want to especially welcome Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Your presence here today is a testament to the importance of this occasion, not only for the Trump administration, but in a very personal way, for you. For you, each of you, for the pursuit of peace, and for President Trump himself. Thank you. Dear friends, what a glorious day. Remember this moment. This is history. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history. All of us are deeply moved. All of us are deeply grateful. For me, being here brings back wonderful memories from my childhood. גדלתי פה, עד גיל 3. הייתי הולך פה בשדות. הייתי הולך פה בשדות עד גבול ידוע, כי פה היה אסור ללכת יותר, זה כבר היה מסוכן. ולכן זה יום גדול. יום גדול לירושלים, יום גדול למדינת ישראל, יום שיחרט בזיכרוננו הלאומי לדורות. So I know some of you didn't follow every word I said in Hebrew. And I'll tell you that I spent the first 3 years of my life in this neighborhood and in Gedi Street in Talpiot, which is not very far away. There were a few charming houses here, many open fields. I remember ambling in these fields with my brother Yoni. He was 6, I was 3. He held my hand very tight. We'd walk to this wondrous house of Professor Joseph Klausner. The renowned Jewish historian was my father's teacher. I used to peer through the slats of the wooden synagogue where he and the great Israeli writer Shai Agnon used to pray on Shabbat. And David, I would approach this place right here, but only so far, because my mother told me, you can't go any further. This was near the border. It was exposed to sniper fire. That was then. This is now. Today, the embassy of the most powerful nation on earth, our greatest ally, the United States of America, today its embassy opened here. What a difference. What a difference. So for me, this spot brings back personal memories, but for our people, it evokes profound collective memories of the greatest moments we have known on this city on a hill. In Jerusalem, Abram passed the greatest test of faith and the right to be the father of our nation. In Jerusalem, King David established our capital 3,000 years ago. In Jerusalem, King Solomon built our temple, which stood for many centuries. In Jerusalem, Jewish exiles from Babylon rebuilt the temple, which stood for many more centuries. In Jerusalem, the Maccabees rededicated that temple and restored Jewish sovereignty in this land. And it was here in Jerusalem, some 2,000 years later, that the soldiers of Israel spoke three immortal words: Har Habayit Be'adenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. Words that lifted the spirit of the entire nation. We are in Jerusalem and we are here to stay. We are here in Jerusalem protected by the brave soldiers of the Army of Israel, led by our Chief of Staff, Gadi Eisenkot. And our brave soldiers are protecting the borders of Israel as we speak today. We salute them all. And the members of our security forces, the Shin Bet and the Mossad, whose head is with us today. We salute you all of you. We gather here today to celebrate another historic day in the life of this city, which I know will take its place alongside other momentous decisions in the history of our people. Over a century ago, the Balfour Declaration recognized the right of the Jewish people to a national home in this land. And exactly 70 years ago today, President Truman became the first world leader to recognize the newborn Jewish state. Last December, President Trump became the first world leader to recognize Jerusalem as our capital. And today, the United States of America is opening its embassy right here in Jerusalem. Thank you, President Trump, for having the courage to keep your promises. Thank you, President Trump, and thank you all for making the alliance between America and Israel stronger than ever. And thank you, a special thank you, to you, Ambassador Friedman. Thank you, David, for everything you do to bring our countries and our peoples closer together. Today, you have a special privilege. You are privileged to become the first American ambassador to serve your country in Jerusalem. And this is a distinct honor that will be yours forever. Nobody can be first again. Thank you, David.
We are in Jerusalem and we are here to stay. The words of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the official dedication of the new U.S. Embassy in West Jerusalem, saying that this was a glorious day of history. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later, but we're going to take you straight now to the Gaza-Israel border, where Stephanie Decker is standing by for us with an update of what's been happening. So, Stephanie, tell us what you're seeing and hearing there.
Well, we're just still trying to figure out what exactly happened. There seemed to be either artillery or a rocket fired from Israel into a field just about 500 meters away from where we are. Okay, I'm just hearing from our producer that it was a watchtower for fighters from Islamic Jihad, but there have been no injuries. We heard loud incoming, a whiz, and then a thud, and we saw the smoke go up in that field there where you see the ambulances gathering now. So Israel has always said it would respond to any breach of the fence at Hamas targets. Now, we've had airstrikes in the northern Gaza Strip in an empty training camp belonging to Qassam, that is the Hamas's military wing. Now this is a watchtower belonging to Islamic Jihad, but from what I'm being told, no injuries. But that certainly just came across the border as the Israeli Prime Minister was giving him his speech. It really took everyone by surprise here. A lot of people started running, trying to figure out what had happened.
And Stephanie, once again, such a stark contrast that we're seeing right now as we look at this split screen. On the one side, West Jerusalem, the dedication ceremony for that U.S. embassy, the Israeli Prime Minister speaking, talking about this being a glorious day and a day of history. On the other side, we're seeing the situation of Palestinians living under a daily siege there in Gaza, and the ongoing protests there that have been going on for over 6 weeks now.
Yeah, and now again has a more tear gas coming across the border. That is, I think, that is the crux, isn't it? It's a tale of two peoples, both claiming the same land. One of them now commiserating 70 years of the establishment of the State of Israel, which for them meant being forced from their homes, forced from their land, hundreds and thousands of people who are still paying the price for that. And I think this is why people here will tell you that they've got nothing left to lose, because things have become worse and worse as the years have gone by, Hazem, and that is the situation here. And I think, yes, certainly on a day when the U.S. Embassy moved to Jerusalem, to West Jerusalem, is being celebrated, is being hailed. We heard the Israeli Prime Minister there saying the most powerful country in the world, our best ally, and they're all sitting there. And then here you have the Israeli forces targeting Palestinians by sniper fire, and certainly from what we've witnessed here throughout the day, peaceful protests, no one was armed that we've seen, people just trying to get closer and closer to the fence, because that is their form of resistance. And a lot of those people are being shot, and of course now, quite shockingly for everyone here, just to witness a strike